One hat as a consumer of government data, another hat as helping the government supply data. So my colleague Venu, who is also here, he extensively works with the government of Telangana, trying to put out a lot of government data, right? So my talk is going to be slightly different. I'll not talk about data, rather, I think a lot of conversations around data, especially in the tech space, are centered around technology, which they shouldn't be, which is why it's going to be slightly different. Let me start with, why do you think government should, supply data? Or why do you think government needs data in the first place? Why should government give all of us data? Why should it even publicly put out data? What's the big deal? Yeah? Okay, transparency is one, good. What else? Yeah, so those two buzzwords, transparency, accountability. Yeah, beyond that, I'm sure, given a large data set from a government, what is the first thing you would do? I'm sure a lot of programmers here. What would you do? Build a dashboard, right? No? Yes or no? It is a fact, right? Now, building a dashboard is not wrong. Does this work? Okay. Let me start with, we'll do some exercise today, not just talk. Can you see that graph? Yeah, what does it say? For those who can read out, these are actual numbers, they're not made up, they're actual numbers. So from 2012 to 2013, the number of rape cases in Delhi went up from 706 in 2012 to 1636 2013, and then it stabilized. So what happened suddenly? Delhi, lot of influx of criminals in Delhi? No? So what suddenly happened in 2012? Yeah? Okay, so number of reports increased after the, yeah, I'm sure people who are old enough will remember the gruesome 2012 case, the Nirbhaya case as we call it. You must have seen Delhi crime also, so you'll know. You're right, yes. So suddenly there was this case of Nirbhaya in 2012, and suddenly the number of rape cases reported. So these are only reported. I'm not talking about whether they actually reflect the situation on ground. Anyway, let me also give you two more. Yeah, two more graphs. Can you see them? The same 2 years. What happened? What happened? Murder cases remained constant, more or less, same 2 years. And then the number of cases of kidnapping and abduction also increased by about more than 50%. Now, so part of the reason, one of your colleagues here is saying that the reports might have increased. Let me ask you another question now. Let me go back and ask. So do you think these 706 cases in 2012, 706 cases of rape in 2012, do you think that this number includes that Nirbhaya case? No? The incident happened in 2012, right? So do you think that number includes, 706 includes one such case from 2012? No? Yes? No. Why not? Right. So the problem is, we'll get to that. The problem is definitions. So what I want to tell you today is data is all good. Government releases a lot of data, and all of us are pretty interested in granular data. Give me GBs of data, but a lot of us miss out on nuances. And nuances, if you miss out on nuances, what you will end up doing is giving wrong statistics. So you must have seen headlines like this in newspapers. Maharashtra leads states, yes or no? You must have seen headlines like these, right? So there is this government agency called the National Crime Records Bureau, which keeps supplying crime data of the country every year. Of course, there is a delay, but it does a pretty good job of giving crime data across the country. Now, the only problem with this is people who analyze this data aren't aware of the nuances of how the data is collected in the first place. So it is not transactional data. It's not fast track that you go and data gets recorded in a database. It is not. So every case, so there is a story. So what I want to tell you as people who predominantly work in technology is somehow the cross-sectoral collaboration, both on technology side and those who understand these things, let me call them subject matter experts in terms of what they know, like crime, working on crime against women. There is, people rarely meet. These days it has improved. I mean, when we were doing this 10 years ago, there's absolutely no forum. These days it has improved. But a big problem that I see today is that cross-sectoral collaboration. So the reason I'll come back to the whole thing, I don't think people will be able to see this graph. Anyway, so the reason those 706 cases does not include the Nirbhaya case is because of the way in which that agency called NCRB counts crimes. So it counts crimes in a certain way, which is called the principal offense rule. I mean, not unique to India, globally it's the same thing, which means if in a case, there are multiple sections under which, the sections, right? Which is IPC, but very soon it will be PN, whatever, right? So under multiple sections, cases get filed. So only the most heinous crime gets counted for this recording. So in that case, the woman eventually died. So which means it must have been a 302 case of murder. Murder carries maybe greater punishment. So it must have been categorized as murder. Things have changed. So 2015, 2016, they've started, while they still follow the principal offense rule for most categories, for women and SC/STs, they've also started giving out other numbers. So without knowing this, I see a lot of people building dashboards on crime, saying UP tops, Maharashtra tops, Telangana tops. Few months ago, I'm sure you must have seen this media campaign where they said thousands of women go missing every year, both in Andhra and Telangana. Is that true? No? They cited government data that was released by the government in the Lok Sabha. Is that true? It is. But numbers are numbers. So people often miss out. The same data also says more than 70% of them are traced. The trace rate in states where there is a high percentage of women missing is also very high, which are mostly southern states. The tracing rate of those states where very low number of cases of missing women get reported, the tracing rate is very low. So in some states where hardly comparatively in the sense, so if you normalize per lakh population, the tracing rate is very low, maybe in the low 30s, low 20s. So if you don't understand what that is and just see headlines, and of course that's how the media is, but I'm not blaming them. What I'm trying to tell you is when you look at data, government increasingly is releasing a lot of data. Please look at nuances. Anyway, so there is one famous graph that I'm sure many of you also have shared on social media. Have you seen this anytime? No? You haven't come across this? Yes. You're not in the right circles, right? So these are pretty viral. So it says percentage of men and women who drink alcohol in India. And you will obviously see the Northeast, very high percentage. Same is with Chhattisgarh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, so on and so forth. Now what does it say? So what do you conclude from this? There is a graph like this that's floating around. There is a source, there is even a source. Where is that source? Yeah, there is a source. What conclusion do you draw? I mean, these are things that we do, right? When we code, we either build a dashboard or do what? Do this. Yes or no? Yes. So tell me, what do you conclude from this? Northeast and Telangana? So a lot of drunkards, right? Lot of business. Yes or no? Fact. But the problem with this data is this. So the survey which gave out these numbers, the survey asked a question. This data is a result of some question. The question says, the percentage of men between 15 and 49 are women who drink alcohol by frequency of drinking. So this number of 40%, 50%, 60% is those people who said less than once a week. It is not the number of people who said they drink almost every day. It is the number of percentage of people who said, who drink, right, less than once a week means, once in a while. And the further problem with this is, the definition of alcohol also includes what? Toddy, for instance. Now, if you go to the countryside and say, do you drink toddy once a week? I'll say yes, twice a week. Now, I'm not saying, does this not mean people are drinking more in Telangana? They may be. They may very well be drinking. But if you're not aware of nuances, these make headlines and often lead to take wrong policy decisions. NGOs will start, pressure groups will start, focusing on this, put out this data. I mean, this state is going to dogs, that state is going to dogs. I'm not saying it's not a fact, it may be a fact, but you're actually choosing the wrong set of data. So nuances are the most important thing when you deal with government data. Any data, more so because I'm talking about government data, more so. The government will never tell you these nuances. They're all available. But when they release the data, nobody is going to tell you these nuances. Unless you know these nuances, unfortunately on the, in the graphs that float around, nobody gives you these nuances. Anyway, another example. So, I'll get to various types of data in a while, in about 5 minutes. I'll get back to this slide a little later. Okay, or let me, so there is this, the Ministry of Family, Health and Family Welfare of the Government of India, religiously, they release a PDF every week. You'll find it, I'll also share the link with you, right from 2009, which means we have close to 750 odd PDF files. So what is available in those PDF files is this on the right. So it is nothing but disease prevalence. They monitor disease prevalence across the country, and in districts where there is a, there is a threshold beyond which it gets reported. So there is a, sudden increase in cases of dengue, sudden increase in cases of scrub typhus, for instance. They get reported, right? No, but unfortunately, 10, yeah. But unfortunately, what happens is, unless you, none of the things are standardized here. So one of the problem with government data is something that neither the disease name is standard, nor the district name is standard, nor the state name is standard. And sometimes you'll also find that the state name and district don't match, which means you might find a district which is in Tamil Nadu listed under Kerala. Now the intent is very good, right? The problem here is, so I'll come to various types. I think this is a good time to, go and talk about, I'll come back to Vande Bharat a little later. Yeah. So I wanted to give you a sense of the kinds of data the government releases. So that so there's various kinds of data. And broadly, I'm not saying this is comprehensive by any means, but broadly. So one is census data. Census is nothing but literally counting every household, every individual. There are 4 different types of census in the country. One is your demographic census for 21, which has been delayed, as you know. Everything related to households is captured. Then there is a livestock census, which happens every 4 or 5 years, which counts all the animals. Then there is an agri census, which again happens every 4 or 5 years, which counts everything related to land and land holding. Then there is a recently started water body census, which counts all water bodies broadly. So they tend to cover everything. Then there is data from surveys. The alcohol one that we saw was from the National Family Health Survey. So since policymakers can't wait for 10 years to look at data and then change policy, because 2 governments would have gone. So surveys keep happening, NSS, NFHS, to see, because census is an exercise that you can't do every year. It's a huge exercise. So surveys happen, NFHS, NSS, all these give you very important inputs to frame policy. Then there is administrative data, day in, day out working of the government, your crime data, the data about fast tax, everything that comes out as part of daily administration is called administrative data. Then we have regulatory data. So anything that is submitted to regulators as part of, the law of the land. Sorry. Then we have compliance data. So all the tech companies, for instance, are now, mandated to submit their monthly reports as part of the intermediary rules. So every month you go to their websites, you will see that there is a report that is published on their website, giving details of grievances received, how many accounts were banned, and so on and so forth. So this is compliance as per certain rules. Then there is transactional data. You know very well what is transactional data. Then of course there are indices, derived data like GDP is derived. Your inflation is an index. These are all derived data. Broadly these types. Not saying these are the only ones, but broadly these. Now, unfortunately, you can't club all of them or take all of them in the same way. In the sense, so which do you think should be the most accurate data of all these types? Which one? Transactional, because we all believe machines more than humans. Partly true transactional because there is very little manual intervention. Of course, somebody games the system, it is prone to as much errors, but because there is very little human intervention. Census and all of them, I'm not saying they are not accurate, but because wherever there is greater manual intervention, there is a greater scope of error. So for the crime data to come to you, somebody is actually entering something, finally it gets to you, right? So there is a series of steps, right? So keep in mind whenever you deal with, so for example, you go to the data portals of whether the government of the state government or the central government, you look at that data, please keep this in mind, right? Now we'll come to challenges. So ideally, any open data initiative of the government ideally should have all this. We are I would say still in the very early stages, of course. So what we see today as open data started in 2012 with something called as the NDSAP, the National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy that was during the previous government. So they started, so the data.gov.in, if you follow it closely, started then as part of NDSAP. So there are quite a few data portals, some private, some government, some sector specific, etc. All of them trying to do their own stuff. Again, the more the merrier, if you ask me the question. We also built a data portal, for instance. So ideally these should be the elements of open data. Unfortunately, not all of them, especially the government ones. So we're still trying to ensure that all of these are part of the data that is released by the government. Okay. Then some challenges. Venu will, he has first-hand knowledge of all these challenges. Unfortunately, we tend to think that, what do they lose if they give out data? But it is nothing but a culture of secrecy that over 60, 70 years, you can't wipe it off in a day. So if I were to give you data, what would you do? Like I said, if you are a techie, you'll do a dashboard or an infographic. If you're a journalist, you will try to find holes because that is your job. Nothing wrong with it. So government is always scared of negative publicity. So the moment you give out data, somebody will write a story, right? So there is the culture of secrecy as well as coupled with a lot of fear. So what if there is negative PR? As you know, there's so many companies offering your perception analysis. So next day the report goes to the CM or the minister saying there is negative perception. And you know what downside effects it will have on the officials. Then of course there is lack of big picture. So they're so caught up with daily work, they rarely get to think of, how will this data be used? So nobody, when they're doing that survey, their focus is on survey. They're not actually thinking how will this data be actually used. So all these issues are there, but things are changing. I wouldn't want to paint a very sober picture. The very fact that there's so much data available today is a very heartening sign, right? I will end with, so these are all sources, maybe I will circulate this. Rahul can share it with you, a host of data. We also do some open source. So I don't code, but we do a lot of technology. And in the process of our own work, we built some free open source solutions. You can go to our GitHub and find these. Some on data, some on, you will find them. But yeah, before I end, we have 2 minutes? Yeah, okay. So I'll start with this. Yeah, all of you must have come across this, right? So what do you think should be the policy solution to this? So how does one approach? So we are doing a practical exercise now. So let's say there is this problem, right? What should we do? Let's say, think you are the railway minister. Create? So you start with solutions. Yeah. So you'll try to first understand the problem, right? When you say understand the problem, so if you have data with you, you'll see what kind of animals are obstructing railway lines, where, what times of the day, are there specific zones, specific areas where this is happening more compared to so all this should happen, and then accordingly your policy response, because government does not have unlimited money. It always works with very limited resources. If it has unlimited money, then we don't need elections also. So because it's such a difficult task of trying to please everybody with very meager resources, right? So you'll have to use it judiciously. Now what we found, I did this exercise because I wanted to find out how actually it happens. So a few days after these press reports came this tweet from the minister. A few days later, maybe 10-15 days. What do you see there? Right. Now do you think that is a solution? No? Why not? Why don't you think this is a solution? You're stopping animals from coming onto the tracks, which means animals don't die. So there is no railway accident. Yeah, you cannot fence. So it's a huge task. You're right. So again, meager resources. So what we found was, one, unfortunately, it was a a decision that was taken in haste. So because we use RTI day in day out, we file RTIs with various zones. They gave the problem is this. If I want to capture this problem statement, what we have in government, I'm not saying every department or every ministry, but a large problem that we face with government is this. So the same kind of question, there are 19 zones which gave me close to 10 different answers. Some said we don't maintain any such data. We don't know which animal, where it dies. There was one zone which said we know, we actually mark the place by lat long, we enter it into a software system, we go and actually conduct awareness camps in the villages where this happens. There was one zone which said that. So obviously that zone is not an outlier, so it should have been a policy from the top, which means these things are not taken seriously. So while somebody makes policy at the top, it doesn't actually flow from actual data. So why am I telling you all this is, the problem is this. So various kinds of responses. So there was the Northeast Railway which said the only animals that die there are elephants. So would the previous solution work in this zone? Obviously not, right? So the larger point I'm trying to make is, look at data, but data is like, water. Whatever shape you take, so look at nuances. There's a lot of nuances with data. So don't jump into, get in touch with sectoral experts, do a lot of cross-sectoral collaboration. That's when the real value of data can be unlocked. Secondly, we are in the very early stages of government giving out data. So for example, I think Sai and his team is working on judicial data, for instance. So it has been one of the tough nuts to crack. So we are just getting started. But at the same time, please do understand that these are very, how difficult is it in a software system to move from a legacy system to a, if somebody wants to migrate, the pain points. So we are maybe in that phase of pain now. The more you encourage, so the demand and supply should work. So the government quality of data will only improve when we start using it and also tell them that something is wrong with this data. Only then the quality will improve. You can't expect one fine day you'll get all the data in your inbox and this is all very clean, structured, etc. It's a journey. So help the governments. When I say help the governments, like I said, I wear two hats. So this hat is about on behalf of, when I say I don't represent government, what I'm trying to tell you is, since we work with departments, we know the pain. So start using, there are issues, please point out those issues, because this is the only way we can push governments to improve their data quality, right? Thank you.
We have time for questions, but we can take it during the networking break if you are okay hanging around for 15-20 minutes. Yeah, so I think we'll all take a short networking break now. We'll have tea and coffee here, and again, you're more than welcome to talk to all of the speakers and ask follow-up questions. Okay. In that case, I think we can do more questions. Sorry. Yeah. Does anyone have questions for Rakesh Garu? Yeah.
Mentioned that this judiciary data is openly available. Judiciary data is openly available. He might. No, Mr. Shai, I'm talking about him. What?
We are working on opening up, working with data on judicial.
First session was.
Yes. The judiciary data is not open. When I said it is open, they started there is a project called ND.
So you have to pay something for that, or?
No, there is, maybe Sai is a better person, but so there is this project called National Judicial Data Grid, so where courts up to the lowest level are part of it. So they upload data on cases on a daily basis, so where you can find pending cases, civil, criminal, pending for how long, what kind of, so of course not every court is, I'm right, not every court is on NJDG. Not every court, yeah. The Supreme Court has recently said we will also come on to NJDG.
So my question is that do we need to do any agreement to fetch the data?
No, see, maybe your question is more about copyright. So, open data's license, the government has, as part of NDSAP, they also have an open government license. Open government licenses, think of it more like CC, Creative Commons. So, some agencies do commercially sell data. So, for instance, which is, the Ministry of Road Transport sells data of vehicle sales. So they have a commercial policy. So if you're somebody who is looking at, if you're into insurance, you need a lot of data, they have a policy to sell, right? By and large, data is free, by and large, but individual government departments might choose to, have a price for the data that they release. But by and large, think of it like a CC license. So which means you can openly use it, but also acknowledge your use.
Yeah, I was thinking like there might be some data protection rules. Data protection rules.
Obviously, you have an act right now.
So basing on that, some of that.
So none of the governments release personal data. So which means, quote unquote, this data does not fall into the purview of DPA, Digital Data Protection Act. So I mean, even if they release granular data, they do it anonymized. So it's not, does not really fall under that. Except in cases where I think there are large schemes where thousands of crores being spent, you can actually go and drill down to the beneficiary. There you will have names, but other than that, you won't have this problem.
So ultimately, you are paying something, or you're not paying anything for.
Depends on the kind of data. Some departments do charge; they have a commercial policy, but by and large, most of them, 90% of them, don't charge. So you can freely take data.
Thank you.
Go to look at some data. Number one, how can I be sure of the accuracy of that data? And second is, if I find some discrepancies, what are the next steps for me as a citizen?
Yeah, so one way we do, for example, what we do on a daily basis is look at similar kinds of data and see if, so errors are easy to find if there are outliers. In fact, one of the slides I wasn't able to show. When I say accuracy could mean two things. One, there are errors in entry, or the way the recording happens does not reflect the true situation on the ground. So crime data, for instance, is a classic case of the second case, not the first case. Second cases, for instance, if you, I'll see if I can pull that slide. That will give you a fair idea of. I don't know, it's not very legible, but if you see, so this is murder per lakh population. So we have normalized. So that effect of population is also gone, despite, then this is stalking per lakh population. So if any society that is ridden with crime, I would say the level of crime would be similar. I'm not saying murders will be equal to stalking. What I mean to say is, at least in terms of, if there are 100 murders in an area and 100 stalking cases, and in another area there are 50 murders, there should be proportionate in a normal society. Of course, there is strife, it will be different. I'm just saying, peacetime. Now, if you see these two graphs, I don't know if you're able to make out, states that have the lowest stalking rate per lakh population, again official data, have some of the highest rates of murder, which is very non-intuitive. I mean, you have people killing each other, but people don't stalk each other, which does not happen in a peace. So which means there is an issue of not accuracy, but there is an issue with the recording, because only when somebody comes to the police station, your data gets recorded. If I don't come to the police station, data doesn't get recorded. So you will have to keep in mind, like I said, for example, if you're dealing with crime data, one of the things I would keep in mind if I draw any conclusions from it is this part. Then there is another part of entries, errors. Outliers can easily be found. For example, GST, I'll tell you what we do. So GST for a long time, from 2017 to till recently, On the website, they give you monthly data, one of the departments which give you monthly data on the GST portal. But in the units, they always used to mention crores. And every month, even a small state like Arunachal or Assam used to have, we call e-way bills, right? When you buy a good. So e-way bill will run into thousands of crores. And we counted all that with, in one single month, the total value of e-way bills was twice the GDP of the country in 1 year. So something was seriously wrong here. So we looked at, we wrote to them, to their credit, they took a month, but then they said the units are wrong, we corrected them. Now what do you do, for instance? So we found it's a clear error, common sense. So sometimes they do respond and correct. Sometimes they don't respond at all. So RBI website, lot of errors. We wrote to them, nobody responded. So it all depends, and I can't give you, a standardized answer in terms of what you should do. You should always reach out. Well, like I said, towards the end of my talk, that is the only way to improve quality. So you can't take an adversarial approach. Adversarial approach you have to take when things demand. That's a different thing. But if you want to ultimately improve the overall quality and the ecosystem, the only way is to use it, help them realize that there are issues. Automatically things will, because nobody wants to put out wrong data and then be caught, get a negative story, right? So there are ways and means, but I wouldn't say there is a silver bullet solution to anything. So it varies from, let's say, data to data, source to source, issue to issue.
Thank you.